Okay, it's a video about the different methods for starting dreadlocks, because there are multiple and you have to choose your favourite. And you're allowed to choose your favourite, it's not like choosing a favourite kid or something. So if you're watching this, it probably means that you're just like at least a teeny tiny bit interested in dreadlocks, otherwise I have absolutely no idea why you're watching this. If you're watching this anyway, I don't understand you. You're an enigma, congratulations. First off, things that are common to all the methods, so it doesn't matter what method you're going to use to start, this is going to happen to all of them. They are all going to shrink to varying degrees depending on your hair, blah blah blah. So what I mean by this is if you have long hair now, not dreadlocks, just long hair and it's like down to your chest. When you take dreadlocks, the dreadlocks will not be that long. They could be half that length. I don't know, it's different for each person, but it's definitely not going to be as long as your hair is. Why is this? Well, straight hair grows out of your head and goes straight down. The hair in dreadlocks obviously doesn't. It goes all over the place. It locks together, it spirals, zigzags inside the dreadlock. So obviously it's going to take longer for a hair to get down here. For example, I started mine and I had long hair down to like here, and then the dreadlocks were only this long, and then it took a long time to grow them out. Other things that are common to all the methods, they all need to be washed and dried properly. I know people think that dreadlocks are dirty, but well, they can be if you don't wash them, like anyone's hair can be dirty. But dirty hair does not encourage dreadlocks. Dirty hair, greasy hair is slippery. You know, greasy hair, it's got oil on it. It's gonna go. It's not gonna lock. Clean hair, like if you wash your hair with shampoo and then don't condition it, so it's clean but not conditioned, it knots like a, you know. So you're gonna have to wash and dry the hair. A lot of emphasis on drying too. You wouldn't leave like a soaked towel just to sit. It would smell like damp and be disgusting. The same will happen to your hair if you don't dry it properly. Dry it properly, wash it properly, everything will be peaches. Also, all these methods are gonna look like shit for at least a year. You choose a method and there is no magic instant dreadlock, unless it's not a real dreadlock. If it's like an extension, then that'll do it. But to get a real dreadlock formed from your hair, it is going to take a year plus for the dreadlock to mature. That is just a fact of life. There's no way around it. You can't buy like a magic potion from whatever website is saying that they're doing that now, because it's snake oil. It doesn't work. So you choose a method, and some of the methods result in something that looks like dreadlocks the first week, and then when you start washing your hair, it all comes out, and then the sort of horrible bird's nest thing begins. But you know, we'll get over that in each individual method. Okay, I'm going to go through the main three, or what I consider to be the main three methods for starting. They are neglect, backcomb, twist and rip, and then I'll touch on some other things. Okay, first off, the neglect / natural / freeform dreadlocks. You call them whatever you want. It's basically doing nothing. If you leave your hair to its own devices, you don't brush it, you don't condition it, you just leave it alone, then it will turn into dreadlocks. It is magic. You know, if you don't brush your hair and you get knots in it, if you leave those knots, they will get knots, and that will get more knots, and eventually it will mat into dreadlocks. All you have to do is wash your hair, dry your hair, and you know, pull the knots every now and again so you don't end up with just one giant dreadlock. That is all you have to do for natural method. You can start today. All you have to do is stop brushing and then stop conditioning. Pros and cons of this method. Pros, it is completely free. You don't have to go to a salon or get a friend or buy a special tool or anything. You just stop brushing and stop conditioning. It will create the wildest looking dreadlocks. They will look natural. Cons to this method. It is the slowest method. All methods for getting dreadlocks are slow. It all requires lots of patience, but this is by far the slowest one because there's no sort of start to it. You have to wait for them to do it themselves. So whereas you could be looking at 18 months for your dreadlocks from other methods to mature, these could take 3 years. And by mature I mean looking how you expect dreadlocks to look, not so much loose hair, they do their own roots tips. So with neglect it's going to take longer. Another con for this method is you have no control over them. If you're like wanting dreadlocks this thick and thinking, I want this thick all over my head, I want uniform dreadlocks, that will not fly with natural. Basically, they form themselves. You have a tiny amount of control in that when two dreadlocks start to form, like here, you can see these two are growing together. With natural dreadlocks, when you see two lumps like that starting to form, you can pull them apart and stop them doubling up and ending up with monster-sized dreadlocks, but that's the only control you have over them. Next method, backcombing. The irony of forming dreadlocks with combing is not lost on me, but this is the method that you will usually end up with if you go to a salon for dreadlocks, and basically it requires you to section off the hair. So you carve your scalp into squares, not literally, not Native American style scalping, but you know, you get into squares. The squares are going to be where the root from each dreadlock comes from. Take the hair, you use a backcomb comb, it's fine metal tooth comb, and you go and it creates a frizzy, knotty lump of hair. And that is it started. You leave it alone after that. It's going to come undone. All these methods are going to come undone in certain degrees, but that's because you can't create instant dreadlocks. It's going to look messy for at least a year, but as I said, they all are going to do that. Pros and cons of this method. They have a closer resemblance to dreadlocks from the start than natural dreadlocks would do. You know, you have a lump of matted hair from the start, from the backcombing, whereas with natural it just looks like kind of unkept hair. That's because it is. So backcombing, you're going to have something that looks a little bit like dreadlocks to begin with, and you have complete control over where the dreadlocks are going to form and how thick they're going to be. You control where the sections are, so you decide where the root of the dreadlocks are going to be, and you control how big the sections are, so that controls how thick the dreadlocks are going to be. So with this method you can have all of them the same size if you so choose. Cons of this method. It takes a long time to backcomb a whole head of hair into a whole head of dreadlocks. Depends how long your hair is, depends how many dreadlocks you want, you know, how thick they are. But you can be looking anywhere between like 3 and 7 hours to do a whole head. And that is 3 to 7 hours of someone pulling your hair and then pulling it with a brush. It is painful, it's going to give you a sore scalp, it is going to hurt to lay on your, you know, lay down for a few days, and you're going to get a serious headache. The dreadlocks formed by backcombing can be quite tough, so as they grow out, the new dreadlock that will form over time from the root is going to be softer than the backcombed bit, so you'll be able to feel the texture difference. When you first get them, they're going to look a bit like Sideshow Bob. They're going to stick out everywhere. So if you're planning on sort of being inconspicuous to begin with, while your hair looks a mess, it's going to be hard to do with backcombing. Because this is a salon favourite, it often ends up getting lumped together with wax. So just remember, if you are going to go with the backcomb method, you're going to want to avoid wax and rubber bands. If you want to know more about wax, I'm going to have a wax video. If you want to know more about rubber bands, I will touch on it in a maintenance video. So, third method. This is becoming the sort of popular method to be recommended online, mainly because it's easier to do than backcombing, and you can do it by yourself, and the dreadlocks aren't sort of as tough and insane looking as backcombing are. Backcombed dreadlocks are. Okay, twist and rip. You section the hair off, you take two sections of the hair, so split into two and get two lumps of it. So pretend this is my section, and pretend this isn't two dreadlocks, pretend it's the section in half, so this is two bits of normal hair, twist it around, round it, round it, round it, round, and then you pull. Basically you do that over and over again, and it makes it knotty, and you know, it creates a sort of knotty, matted chunk of hair. And that's the dreadlock started. You can help it along by rubbing your head with a woolly jumper. You know, it makes the hair frizzy and sort of staticky and more likely to get knotted. But that's basically that method in a nutshell. Pros and cons of this method. Okay, pros, you can do it by yourself. You can do it with a friend. You don't have to pay some professional at a salon to do it. Not like you have to pay for professional for backcombing anyway, but it's simpler, less skilled. You don't need any tools for it, you don't need the backcomb brush. It doesn't hurt quite so much as backcombing. The dreadlocks that are formed aren't quite as stiff as the backcomb dreadlocks, so they don't stick up all over the place. And the texture difference isn't so great. Like the backcomb dreads are tough, new dreads are soft. You don't get that so much with twist and rip. Cons of this method. The initial dreadlocks aren't as solid as they would be with backcombing, so when you backcomb and then you wash your hair, it falls out a bit. Twist and rip falls out even more, so if you want your unmature locks to look a certain way, they're going to look a little bit messier as twist and rip, but basically it sort of depends on your hair and how much you do the twist and rip initially. More cons for this one, you have to remember not to use wax because it's another method that people like to lump wax onto, and no rubber bands. That's basically it. There's not an awful lot of cons to this method as long as you don't put anything else onto them. Apart from it doesn't create so much of an instant dreadlock. I mean, I've sort of gone over the fact that it's going to take a year either way, at least a year either way, no matter what method you use, but some people like them to look a certain way at the start and they don't feel that twist and rip gives them this, but I beg to differ. Okay, I'm just going to quickly go over some other little things. There's dread perming, where you can pay a salon a lot of money to dip your hair in a chemical that makes your hair all frizzy. And yeah, it's not, if you look it up, it's not really a method in itself, it's just a method of getting your hair frizzy and therefore more likely to take on the locks. And it's expensive, and then it's just lumped together with another method, so it's dread perming before a backcombing session and dread perming before a twist and rip session. So that's really expensive and it can damage your hair, and I would say you're probably better off just rubbing your head with a wool jumper to make your hair frizzy. Also, once you've gone into the salon for that, they might be inclined to add wax to the newly formed dreadlocks. It depends, you'll have to see. But I wouldn't recommend dread perming. Other than this, there's also crocheting. I'm going to cover crocheting as a form of maintenance in a maintenance video, but some people have made dreadlocks entirely from crocheting, like similar to when you make dreadlock extensions, fake dreadlocks for extensions. These dreadlocks do not have anything like resembling the texture of real dreadlocks or dreadlocks that are formed on their own. So if you crochet dreadlocks in and then leave it to its own devices, it's going to look really different. Crocheting takes a really long time, so you're going to have to pay someone for many hours worth of work. And crochet dreadlocks don't properly mature because the hair doesn't move. To mature, dreadlocks need to move a little bit so the hairs can move and knot together. With crochet they do not move at all because they're all crocheted into place. So most people with crochet dreadlocks end up having to go back and have the roots crocheted and crocheted and crocheted, and the dreadlocks never properly maturing by themselves, and therefore if you'd have gone with another method and spend that same amount of time and less money and let them just do their own thing, then they would sort their own roots and tips and you don't have to pay for anyone to do it, and they don't look like synthetic dreadlocks. They're the sort of main things I wanted to cover. If there's another method of dreadlocks, some other magical way of creating dreadlocks, I'll answer questions about that.